Hi all, welcome to this session on interview preparation. A very important session, how to make it to face various set of interview questions. So we'll be starting with the basic set of questions in this session, and then we'll move on to advanced in the subsequent sessions. So today's topic is all about interview preparation. So let's go through all the basic interview questions that can be asked in all our interviews. One is, what is RPA? So a typically common term, used in multiple ways, like what is RPA? So RPA stands for robotic process automation. Now the automations that is done by robotics in a simplest way, it is something like any automation that can be done through robots without any human intervention or with human intervention. And this is one of the most advanced and the most latest technologies that is available in the market. And this will definitely help for companies to scale the processes, go to markets with what we say the best reach, and give some of the best features and functionalities in the market, when they are actually able to uh, take this forward with some different technologies where less human intervention is required and more of it, like the robots can take care, so that the teams can be utilized for the better productivity into the better what we say other departments. So now, in the modern world, right, it's just not RPA. It's also called as intelligent automation, intelligent process automation, or business process automation. So they are the different terminologies used. So RPA is like one such tool where it's just not limited to automation, but it's also like applicable where we can integrate with machine learning. So it can be RPA plus machine learning, or we can integrate with AI. So it can be RPA plus AI, or it can be all of them. So it can be RPA plus ML plus AI. And that is why one of the best leading technology currently in the market is RPA, because it can be integrated with any such what we say tools that that's available, and the robots can do exactly same what they're intended to do through human beings. And that is all about what we say RPA. So RPA basically helps to complete the transaction processing, giving multiple responses, doing multiple operations, preparing reports, interacting with applications, automating applications. So all this is possible through RPA. Okay, next is, what is UI automation, or what is automation through UiPath? So UiPath is one of the leading vendor in the market, which helps us to do the RPA process automations. Now, it's one of the tools where, we have one of the best communities across the platforms. It is very, very simple to use. It has host of features and functionalities that make it one of the strongest contenders in the market. And not only that, it's a tool that gives you lots of features. It's something where it's like freely available, like they give us a free license to learn. We can implement, explore, and then go to the market. So the whole the tool is very, very user friendly, and something that is why it is one of the leading tool in the market. Now, the another aspect of is this, this tool is just not like any other tool, but it helps us to, not only do the automation, but it helps us to do any kind of back-end automation and front-end automation, application automation, and, human in the loop automation is also possible. And that is why it's one of the very leading tool in the market. Next is, moving at a pretty, the comparison question, like, how UiPath is different from, your Selenium. So Selenium is like, a tool, or, an application that is designed to interact or automate an web-based applications. Okay, but Selenium, it cannot interact with large set of applications, or, cannot do, the checks on, everything that a typical RPA tool is able to do. Okay, and then it has nothing called continuity. Like, you cannot take a value from one place and you can, update it to another place and, use it. But it's just like, you are doing certain basic sets of operation. But whereas, UiPath is completely a different tool. Like, it can, extract the data from some place, it can update it into some other place. Okay, it can, manipulate the data, it can, interact with multiple applications, interact with multiple remote servers. And, it's just not that, there's no boundaries with this kind of automation. And that's how these two tools are actually completely different. Now, apart from that, right, you may you are trying to perform all the operations that is similar to human beings, which is possible in any of the RPA tools, but it is actually not possible in the what we say any of the Selenium kind of tool, and that is why it's one of the very leading RPA tool again. Okay, so that is how the basic difference between Selenium and UiPath is. Next, moving ahead, what is the value and scope of data types in UiPath? So you have seen we have created variables. So variables are used to store the temporary data. Now, when we process this particular sets of data, what is that we have to do is we'll have to restrict the value, like what kind of value that I want to store within my variables, what kind of value that I want to what we say store it in my arguments and everything. So when I want to restrict the values, right, and I can define the specific types, and that is what is this data type. So I can have a data type of integer, I can have it of string, I can have it of what we say boolean, I can have it of date time, I can have it of a data table, I can have it of an array. So my data type can be of multiple such what we say different types. Okay, so basically the data type is used to store the type of value that we want to what we say store it, and that's how we even can restrict the user from entering the value which is what we say not required. So we can block that values, or we can notify that no, this doesn't allow anything something that is not intended to. For example, if it's a phone number field, I don't want any user to enter any ABCDEFGA. so what I'll do, I'll restrict this particular field by the type as string, sorry, type as integer. So integer will only allow you to pass number values. It doesn't allow you any string, and that is how I can make sure that only the value that I want to store is being stored there. For example, I have date and time. So if I want to store like hours, minutes, seconds, so I can give a certain format like I should have a mm, seconds format, and then it is dd, yy format. So this way I'm restricting the values that I intend to store, so that it's like very easy to process the type of value that we're looking for. And then you know the scope is very important. Scope is the boundary within which you're able to access this particular variable, outside which it is not possible. So if I want to restrict some value to be accessed within that particular boundary or the range, then that is what is called as scope. Okay, so scope is the main deciding factor, like who can access the values of the variables, where and all I can give the permission, where and all I can change the scope that that others can access. So all this is coming into picture while we consider scope as one of the important parameters. So scope is like if I want to keep certain data hidden from certain aspects, then I can definitely will be able to do that under scope. So this reduces the data leaks that can happen during our processing. So it ensures that the only the intended users with the intended access receives the right set of value. Okay, so that is about what we say the difference between scope and the data types in UiPath. Next, what are arguments? So we have seen the variables. Variables are basically is used to store the temporary data, but within the same file. Same file is my current file where I want to do the operations. So that is how variables are defined to, and that is why it is bound by scope. So outside that scope, we will not be able to use or access that particular variable. Whereas my arguments are used to transfer or pass the value between multiple files. So it can be one file or multiple file within the same project. Okay, that means it allows me to pass the value easily. Okay, rather than defining the value again and again, or getting that value again and again. What I'll do is, if the values are once received, I just have to what we say pass it throughout my process wherever required, and that reduces again the dependency of getting the value, again asking the user same thing again and again to provide the values. That can be drastically reduced. So I'll be taking care that okay, the values that is actually required is only that is what we say being passed throughout my process, and that is the possible through arguments. So the difference between variables and arguments is like variables is bound by scope, whereas arguments is defined by the direction. Direction is like whether I want to send the value or whether I want to receive the value. If I want to send the value out, then the type of the direction is out. If I want to receive the values, then the direction should be in. If I have to send and receive the values together using the single argument, then the type of the argument can be defined as in and out together. So that is about the argument that we have. Now, what are the properties in UiPath? So now properties are like, very important from any tool perspective. We define like what is the input, what is the output, okay, what is the value that I want to pass it, what is that value that I want to process, okay, what is the time, whether it has to be a real-time value, whether it has to be a dynamic value, or what are the other properties. So properties will help us to make sure that okay, what is that we want to do the operation on particular activity or the particular step. So this activities, right, like that we use in UiPath has multiple such properties like continue on error, delay before, delay after, timeout, wait for ready, the target, the input, the output, the private flag. Multiple such properties are given here in UiPath. So these properties are the ones that defines that what kind of things that we want to do. For example, here, right, see in these properties that we have just spoken about. So continue on error, whether on an event of an error that happens within my process, should my step continue execution or should I stop? So this is what we define here, continue on error. In case I want to continue, despite there's an error and there's no dependency on the next set of activities, then I can say yes, you can continue. Otherwise, please stop. So this is one such example. Let's take another example. Like I want to say delay before or delay after. So delay before is like before my steps start operating or before my steps start doing any automation. How much time do I want for the particular step to wait? That is what it says the delay before. Whereas delay after is like after my operation is done, how much time should my process wait before the next set of activities or the next set of operations are continued. This is very, very important. Like you are defining, like that okay, this is the time that is required for the process execution. So rather than making it fail, right, we are telling that you just wait for this time for the operation to get completed. So that is something about delay before, delay after. Then timeout milliseconds. So timeout is like how long should the process wait for that particular operation to complete? In case it is the application is not available or it's yet to load, and how long should we wait before the system can actually fail the process? So it's just like we give the uppermost time that we want, or we know that the process will take 1 minute, so we can give let's say timeout of 2 to 3 minutes. So it's the uppermost limit. Like let's say even if it takes more than 1 minute, the process will not fail. So that is what is about timeout milliseconds. Then we have something called wait for ready. So we have again many properties in wait for ready. So like interactive, completed, none. So it ensures that whether my application is fully loaded before I do the operation, or is it partially loaded, and I'm allowing the robot to do the operation. So based on the requirements, the behavior of the applications, the behavior of the platforms, and the properties will be defined accordingly. And then the target is like how a particular activity recognize that particular elements, the attributes, the selectors, so everything comes in the target section. It's like okay, what is the the specific what do we say, the key nodes, like what are the nodes with which we are going to define our operation. So everything can be taken care by what we say the target section. So it's the the typical process where you're trying to recognize the particular operation that you're trying to do on the screen. So that is about what we see some of the properties that we are. So the properties a key section within the UiPath activities. So there are no hidden properties. It's like what you see on your screen. That is what we are basically trying to set and make sure that they are actually used on the need basis based on our behavior of the application, based on the changing the dynamics we're supposed to use the appropriate properties. Okay, moving ahead, what are the flowchart, activities in UiPath? So flowchart is typically like, we can, design the process based on our flow diagrams. So we can have our own set of decisions, we can have our own set of directions, and that is why we are using flowcharts. So now flowcharts like typically have multiple activities of like we have flow switch that is exclusively for flowchart. We have flow decisions that's exclusively for flowchart. So here we are trying to make sure that there is something unique for which we'll have to go and design it in flowchart, because when you want to loop your process based on specific criteria, specific conditions, and certificate intervals, then flowchart is the best set of operations that we typically do within our design approach. So, this is about some of the quick questions that we have gone through. I'll give you a quick time, 2 minutes to recap what we have done so far before we move ahead. Okay, so we'll move ahead. Now, what is a flow switch? A flow switch is typically like, or why do we even need a switch? Okay, the purpose of the switch is like within the single check, right? You are evaluating multiple conditions. Rather than using a lengthy nested ifs, what we are typically doing is we are using a flow switch. So flow switch will typically allow you to check for multiple conditions. Okay, in this UiPath, flow switch will allow you to check for totally 11 conditions, one being input. So totally we'll have 12 nodes, and flow switch is exclusively used only within flowchart. Okay, and this like inflow switch, right? It's just not that we are checking one basic set of values true or false, but here we are basically able to what we say check multiple things. Like let's say it's like string, integer, boolean. We can check for multiple such values here in what we say uh, flow switch. And as I said, in a go, like we are able to check for 12 particular values, and that is like a beneficial rather than having a nested if. Now, moving ahead, why majorly we use sequence activities within our process. So typically sequence is like it's like a top down approach, or it's like a top to bottom approach. So we are processing from top towards the bottom. So basically what happens is the processes that we are designing, that really helps you to plan, and you can execute at a top to bottom. So everything gets included whenever we are trying to do the operations. And the only thing is like basically in the what we say sequence, right? It's like a single block of activities. So entire operations are done together, whether you execute, whether you frame, everything is a single block. So we can have multiple such blocks within our process for our operation also, which is possible within sequence. Okay. But sequence is something like, it's like again, until really necessary to go to flowchart, we end up using sequence, because sequence is like, as I said, it's a very streamlined, only top to bottom approach, looks pretty simple. We can have multiple blocks based on our conditions, requirements, and more importantly, as I said, you can design the way that you want, based on the criteria, the conditions. So we are free to use either sequence or flowchart within our process. But just remember that sequence is always top to bottom, or like top to bottom execution of your process. Now, what are state machines? So this is very important again from the interview perspective, like or how do state machines help? So state machines is like we have multiple states within our process. So like multiple states, and each state will have its own set of conditions, criteria based on which we can go and do the operation. If at all we are matching the criteria, we are allowed to enter that particular state and do the operation. Whereas compared to your any flow chart, or it's like a straight plain forward automation. So without conditions also we can go, but here it's like a state. So each state, right, it will have its own set of conditions and criteria. We can define the way we want the conditions and the criteria. Then what is branching? Now branching is like the different set of conditions that we want to evaluate. Okay, it can be one check, it can be multiple check. Okay. Now this is typically used when we have large set of conditions to check, like large or more than one set of conditions to check. Now, this will help us, like in case of my one condition not satisfied, should I go to other one? If other one not satisfied, what is it I have to do? So like I have multiple rooms to check and do the operation. So this helps to streamline your number of processes rather than doing multiple checks separately again and again. What I'll do is I'll use the branching and check within a single go. So that helps me to define my process very clearly, helps us to easily navigate throughout the process, and again do the same set of operations but within a shorter span of time. Next is, how do you create a project in UiPath? So this is very important, because there are two ways now. See, people get confused if I say two ways, but actually the way is only one. If you go to the home menu or the home panel. Under the home panel, we have an option called new process. So that is where we are actually creating a new project. That's the way that we can create a new project. But within our UiPath Studio, within the design panel, after the project creation, we have something called new. So that new will allow us to create a sequence, sorry, not sequence, multiple process files within the project. So that is not creating a new project, but it is like creating a multiple process files within the project. Whereas in the home menu, if I create a process, then it's actually allowing me to create a new project. So this is why, okay, there's a difference between a create a project and create a process file, because process files are confined within the current project only. Okay, whereas project is like for a multiple set of operations. So that is the difference between a what we say create a project and creating a process files. Next important is like how about different sets of recordings. So we have different sets of recordings in UiPath. Now these recordings are like used to mimic the human steps. So like whenever we point it to the application, right? So how is that we can mimic this particular human steps? So that is the purpose of having the recording. So we have different types of recording in UiPath. In the most recently we have like basic recording, desktop recording, web recording, image recording, Citrix recording, and computer vision recording. So how are this helpful? So basic recording, right? It's typically used to automate any of your desktop-based applications. Okay, now a desktop-based application, but the thing here is the basic recording generates the full selectors. A full selector is something like, it captures every minute to minute information, each and every step by step. And hence, it can be at times slower in the operation. When you have bigger processes, large number of steps, then my process can execute slowly. Whereas similarly, similar set of recording called desktop recording, this also does recording to all the desktop-based application. But the difference here is that it generates a partial selectors. So when I say partial selectors, right, it will attach a window between each and every certain steps that is bound within that particular window. So what happens is when I generate a partial selectors, right, it's basically having a parent-child relationship. If I do one change at the parent level, right, it's applicable to multiple child level activities or child level properties. So for all of them, right, the same change is applicable. And since it is having the head, or as I said, like since it is having the top level approach, okay, it is actually having the better benefits, because it is actually when you have a large set of operations and you're doing a similar set of screen operations, then what happens is it makes your operation a bit faster. Okay, now the reason is like for let's say one application, let's take any application that I'm doing a Google search. Now what are operations I do within the Google search? That's part of my single screen, and all the operations are captured within that particular window until unless my screen changes. So if I have to do any change at my screen level, so all my child operations, right, and my everybody will be under same attached window. And this helps whenever like we are having large set of operations, then my processing actually becomes faster. Because what happens is whenever I'm doing processing, I don't have to recall that same window again and again in my memory. In case of basic, right, it has to recall that window, do the operation, recall the window, do the operation. But whereas in basic operation, right, what is happening is it's actually visualized once within your memory and you are just doing the operation. If the window is properly found, and you just have to do the operations at the, the child level, and this way it is actually bit faster compared to basic recording. Now it's the next is web recording. So web recording is a typical recording which we use or we do it for all our web-based applications automation. Again, even here also, like this is also like desktop. It also generates a partial selectors, but here instead of attached window, it has an attached browser. So whenever we have to attach a browser, okay, means it is keeping that particular window in the memory and doing the operation. So on every change of a window or on every change of a tab, okay, it basically attaches a separate set of windows. Next is like a Citrix based automation. So Citrix based automation is like we're trying to automate something on a remote desktop. A remote desktop is like a computer within computer. So if anything that I have to do it on a multi-layer windows, like on a remote windows, then in that case we are always going to use a Citrix based automation. Apart from that, we have something called image based automation. So image-based automation is nothing but like, I'm trying to automate or click on certain images or click on a text within the image. So that is called as, that are the certain features that we have in image automation. Apart from that, we have most recently called computer vision automation. So this will allow you to automate using the most advanced technologies of ML and AI. So it uses AI models to, do your automation. And this way it's basically helping you to what we say, make your automation more stronger, less error prone, and it's doing the work much faster. So these are the difference among all the types of automation and different types of recording. Very important from an interview perspective. Like they can definitely ask, how many types of recording options do we have? Can you tell me about all of them? Okay, so it's very important aspect. We should be knowing that. So before we move ahead, right, I'll quickly give a 2 minutes break for you to recap the questions that we have covered so far before we go to a very next important topic of selectors. Okay, now we'll move ahead. Next is selectors and the wildcards. So now very important, what are selectors and how do we make our selectors dynamic and what are the purpose or what is the use of wildcards in UiPath. So now coming to selectors. Selectors are like important elements or attributes within which or using which that your UiPath robots actually identify the operation that it has to do. So this is very important because without selectors, like how will robot know where to do the operation, okay, or what is it, that it whether it's doing rightly or wrongly. So these selectors are nothing but like HTML attributes that allows us to identify the exact location of the positions where it has to do the operations. And not only that, it also uses like certain image-based recognition to validate the operations. Now the selectors are, basically, what we say meant to, identify. But how do we make them dynamic? So dynamic is something like, how do we make them to work in multiple different places where, similar values are found. So to make it dynamic, right, we have to use wildcards. So basically we have two types of wildcards. So we have star, and the other one is a question mark. So asterisk or star is used to replace the multiple values, whereas question mark will replace a single character values. So what wildcards will do is it helps you to run the same process into different applications or different places where this particular what we say the attributes are matching, and this way helps us to reduce the what we say number of steps and number of operations that we might have to do again and again. Now wildcards typically, we need to customize in such a way that, it doesn't do anything which it is not intended to. Though we are trying to customize, but it has to be within the boundary of what it is intended to do and not go beyond something where it can lead to failures of the process too. So typically wildcards are like, to customize your selectors and make it more and more dynamic. Very important from your interview perspective, like, what are wildcards, why do we need the wildcards, how many types of wildcards are available, or what are the different ways that I can make my selectors dynamic, or what are the wildcards that is used in my selectors to make it dynamic. Apart from that, to make the selectors dynamic, right, we can directly pass the variable values to. So I can use directly variables, values to be passed into the selectors to make it more and more dynamic, and accept the real-time value rather than using the fixed value. We can actually pass a very realistic value, as in when we process whatever is the value received, we can pass it that way, make it more accurate process based on our needs. Next is how do you perform data scraping? Now, why scraping is used? Basically, scraping is used to do the extraction of data. Now, scraping is relative term for extraction of the data. Now, how do we use data scraping is like we have to build patterns. Okay, we are actually creating the structured data using data scraping, but with the help of patterns. So we basically try to build the patterns. Okay, these patterns are like inbuilt having a machine learning model. So it helps us to generate the the set of data based on the patterns that we built. And then it also helps us to locate like if the data is into multiple pages. So we just have to point it to the two data sets of the similar type, and build the structured data from across all our data. It's a very important when we have data to be extracted into the structured format, but the given data that we are trying to see is not actually structured. So using data scraping, we can what we say do this particular option of getting the structured data. What if we already have a structured data into our application? So if the data is already structured into our application, then what we are going to do is we are going to what we say extract as it is the structured data in the form of table directly into the data scraping. That is another advantage. Like we don't have to lose any format or something. As it is, it allows us to scrap the structured data directly into the table. That is the advantage of using data scraping. Basically, it generates structured data in the form of table. Now, what is the use of assign activity? Now, assign activities, basically helps us to assign the value. It can be to a variable, it can be to an argument, or from variable to variable, argument to argument, or from variable to argument. Any way it is possible, or argument to variable, I can actually pass the value to my, what is it, any particular entity. And apart from that, right, whenever you want to increment the values, or whenever you want to loop it within your process in that event, right, we can actually use assign activities. Okay, so or if you want to store the data in array format and put it in any again entity like variable or argument, then we can actually use assign activity. Basically, it is used to assign the value to any of your, what we say, like variables or arguments. So usually your values flow from right to left. If at all something wants to receive the value, then it is on the left. The one that is holding the value will be on the right side of the activity. Okay, very, very important. Next, moving ahead, like what is the use of delay activity? Now, why do we even have a delay activity? So delay activity will allow us to, what we say, pause our process for that particular given interval and then continue our operation. So basically what it is doing, it will wait for a particular time, whatever is the time that you have given it the delay, it's like a hard time. That means it has to wait for that particular time to do the operation. And post that, it will go and do the operation. So delay is like basically, we are giving the fixed time for the process to wait and do the operation. So it's like sometimes we know that our application takes so and so time to load. And it's better to add delay and then move ahead with the processing, so that it ensures that we are able to do the successful automation without any failures. Moving ahead, what is the use of do while activity or while do activity? Now, these are the two different activities used basically from a looping perspective. So, do while will actually keep on looping your process, okay, till the condition is true. The moment condition is not satisfied, it exits the loop. Basically, whenever we are into application, when we are trying numerous operations, and until the conditions are getting satisfied, we can go ahead. And once it is not satisfying, I can stop this particular process, or basically to increment some numbers, or do multiple operations based on certain specific conditions. We can use do while or while do operations. The difference between both of this is like in one of the place where we are trying to do the condition first and the operations later, and whereas in the other options, like we are trying to just make sure that operations are done, then you are checking for the conditions. So based on our need, again we are going to use either of the do while or the while do activity. Next, moving ahead, what is the use of if activity? Like if activities now basically gives you either true or false value. So any one of the criteria can be true. Both of them will never be true at the same time. So either if my condition is true, what to do, else what to do. So I'm going to give two choice to the robot. Okay, based on my conditions that I want to evaluate, I'm going to say yes, what to do, what not to do, what to do, what not to do. So that is the use of if activity. Okay, basically, as I said, it only executes one at a time. That means it can be either true or it can be either false. Now we have gone through a flow switch, right? So we also have something called a control switch, or also called a switch. So the the drawback I would say of flow switch is like where I can only evaluate 12 nodes at a time. So that's my upper limit of maximum values that I can evaluate. So anything beyond that, then it's not possible. But as you know that in the flow switch, we can loop the process, loop the criteria wherever we want. But then we have another type of switch called control switch or switch. So here, basically, this can be used both in sequence and flowchart. But the only difference here is there is no limit with the number of conditions that I want to evaluate. Absolutely, there is no upper limit. So it's like, I can do as many operations that I want with my, what we say, control switch. I can evaluate as many conditions as I want. The only thing is this cannot be looped. Unlike, your, what you say, flow switch that can be looped, this cannot be looped at any point of time. And as we just discussed, do while and while do activity. So here in the while do activity, right? You first check for the condition, and if the condition is satisfied, then you are doing the operation. Again, it is similar to the previous one. We are doing, multiple looping, and it will only try to do the operation as far as my conditions are getting satisfied. Okay. And again, it's used for multiple looping. So it's basically, it keeps on looping the data and it will keep on processing as far as it is possible. Okay. So that's the difference among all the activities that, especially from a loops and conditions perspective. So quickly, I'll give you 2 minutes time to, recap what we have done so far before we take this forward. Okay, so now we'll move ahead. What is the purpose of using for each loop? Now, a for each loop is a very important loop, that helps us to, loop through each and every item or each and every row within our process. So we can use either for normal for each, or we can use for each for the data table. If it's for the data table, we can iterate for each and every row that we are going to have it as part of our, the process. And if it's normal for each, we can, iterate for each and every item. So basically, it's a loop that, automatically increments and go to next set of record rather than we doing that manually. That is the, the purpose of using for each, it's basically used, when we want to iterate the data and, reach to the, or travels to the last set of data that is available. A very important loop, loop when we work with data table or, the Excel based operations, or, when you want to extract some data from the, the folders, and, it's very, very helpful. As I said, it's just not limited to that. It's just some example, but then you can use it for multiple purposes. Next, moving ahead, what is the use of break activity? So break will actually, allow you to exit the particular, the execution loop. You can, as and when your criteria is matched, you can simply break and come out of my loop. So this will allow you to, proceed, come out of the loop and, proceed further for the rest set of the operations. So there is a difference between a break and stop. Like stop will completely stop. Whereas break will, we are just breaking the existing processing, and then we are actually what we see moving ahead with the next set of planned activities within our process. Next is what is package manager. Okay, so package manager is like, like we have multiple activities in UiPath. So how are these activities, what we say, used, or from where are we able to extract this multiple set of packages for the activities? So that is typically like, we have managed packages. Managed packages allow us to, download the packages from the global store, various set of packages by various set of developers, various set of publishers will allow us to, use these packages, and we can, design the functionalities accordingly. So basically, the common store, I would say, like for everybody across the UiPath platform or community, get the various set of, the packages that is available, within the package store. So we can actually basically, get the packages, we can install them within our machines and use it within our requirements wherever applicable. Now, the best use of this package manager, like, we can also design our package. We can also, publish our packages as part of the process. And also, and very importantly is, these packages will give you proper set of information, like, when was it last updated, who is the author, when was it last, what current version it is, or which version that you want to install that to. So we have a choice here to install the, backdated versions also, like, so based on our requirement, based on our choice, we can even install that. And then also, the package will have all the dependency that is required for the process. So this is all about, package manager. Next is what is project debugging. So debugging is like, troubleshooting your code for various set of issues. So if at all we have any issues, how do we recognize them, or how do we identify them? So we can add, various breakpoints. We can do step into, step out, step out. We can, do retry, we can, terminate, we can, use multiple operations, or multiple activities as part of debugging. Okay, so basically what happens is then we can pass the values during our debugging and check what is it. Is that the value causing a problem? Or is that the process is actually having some issues and we need a fix? So actually debugging will allow you to identify the root cause of the issues, and you can troubleshoot, find out the root cause, and go ahead and fix that particular, what we say, set of operations that is required. So that is about debugging. Then what is automating recording? So recording, as I said, is like, just, mimicking the human steps. You are just going to go to the various applications, point the areas that you want to automatically capture, and then, the system will automatically capture and move ahead with this, the steps. So you just, when you come out of the recording, the steps are automatically ready for us to execute. Now, there is something called what is publishing of an automation project. So publishing is nothing but, you are actually archiving this entire project into a package file. Now, why package is required? Because see, it's not something like we can pass this, what we say, everything like, your files, your projects, anywhere to anywhere, just as it is. And when we are deploying these processes to Orchestrator, it has to be some standard format, and that is why publishing is required. So when you publish a project, right, it will actually zip, or whatever we call it as, package this entire project, and it is going to create a single file. So this file will have an extension called .nupkg. Usually the naming convention is the process name .process version .nupkg. This is the sole file that we're going to give to our administrative team who is going to deploy this entire packages into Orchestrator and create a process out of it. It's very, very important, what we say, the packages are generated and stored at the orchestrator level, because when we're running the processes through orchestrator, right, it is not just because we have the program in your my documents UiPath folder, so it is executing, because the robot which is going to execute this packages, right, it is not going to execute from my documents UiPath. So it has its own set of directory from where the packages are going to get executed. And hence it's also very important that the packages that we build for robot is different than where we are actually customizing, so it cannot be at the same location. So that is the use of publishing the process. So also while publishing, right, it exactly tells us like, is there any error, is there any particular set of issues, and then we can go and look at it and make sure that it is correct. Fine. Quick, giving a 2 minutes break for you to recall whatever we have done in this particular, the set of questions that we have gone through. So now moving ahead, what are the different UI activities properties in UiPath? So again, these are the activities that will help you to, decide based on your applications, based on the behavior, based on your process failures, and what is that, activities that you have to set. So again, these are the common things that we just covered, like, whether to continue an error or not, whether, we want to delay before, delay after, should the process be timeout after the, the wait time that is we have exceeded, should we wait for the applications to be completely loaded or available, and what is that, the target, like what are the types of selectors that we have, what are the the coordinates with which we want to locate that particular element or entity. So these are some of the visible UI properties that we do it. Okay, next is like, how do you enable image or text-based process automation? So image or text-based is possible using various OCR activities that we have in UiPath. So we can try to use, the free UiPath OCR activities. If not, we'll have to, procure the license for the, the paid OCR, the connectors that are available, and we can, do all the sets of extraction. So basic, like, recognizing, hovering, clicking, all that is absolutely possible. Extracting the data, with minimum sets of information is anyways possible. Next is what is Citrix automation. So Citrix automation is like, you are executing automation on a remote desktop or a virtual machine. Okay, and basically, most of the Citrix automations involves image-based recognition. And since, it's like image-based, any change in the image or any change in the location will lead to the process failures, and that is why, Citrix is like, the second preferred compared to the regular automation. Always the first preference is a regular automation. Okay, so these are some of the basic questions that we have as part of today's exercise. Will come up in the subsequent sessions with the most advanced questions that we can use it as part of our, or, that can be asked as part of our, UiPath journey. So that's it from today's session. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you. Bye-bye.